Well, if you're a longtime listener, you know I am an absolutist on the Second Amendment. I believe that if you are a law-abiding citizen, you should be allowed to carry a gun. And so my attention was drawn to this bill that is passed in Texas, allowing residents to carry handguns after a natural disaster. I want to go to my gun law expert, Edwin Walker, to get his take on this bill. He happens to be based in Texas. Edwin, welcome. Can you tell me a little bit about this bill? What in fact does it allow?
Yes, well, thank you for having me. And it is it's a bill that comes out of course, the situation that we had here a couple of years ago with Hurricane Harvey. I'm sure all your listeners saw all the footage on the news and how many people had to be evacuated, particularly by those high water rescue vehicles and boats. The Cajun Navy, of course, came over and contributed a lot of good assistance with regard to that. Well, the law here in the state of Texas says that an individual who does not have a license to carry, what we call here in Texas an LTC, they can have a handgun lawfully on property that they own, and they can have a handgun lawfully on inside of a motor vehicle that they own and a watercraft that they own. But if they're in a vehicle they don't own or they're in a watercraft that they don't own, they are prohibited by law from carrying a handgun. And so this caused a lot of issues with regard to people who were obviously in a state of panic. They were in a disaster zone. They were in an evacuation area. They were having to, grab what they could. They of course, when you do that, you feel very vulnerable. And they were legally prohibited from carrying their handguns if they didn't have an LTC. And so this bill made it through the legislature, and it's expected to be signed by Governor Abbott. He's a very pro-Second Amendment governor. He's got a lot of bills to sign in the next 20 days, and I'm sure he'll get around to signing this one. But it did face some opposition, even by Republicans in the Texas legislature, which was very surprising because the bill has two very, very, very common sense concerns. And the concern is that people who don't have LTC, which is the majority of the population here in Texas, Texas has got about 27 million people, and only about 1.5 million have LTCs. So the vast majority of people don't have LTCs. This, like I said, state law prohibits them from carrying, so it allow individuals who are in disaster areas or evacuation zones to carry their handgun without being in violation of the law for purposes to obviously protect themselves. And also, one of the chief items that are looted by criminals, because obviously criminals can't legally get their hands on firearms. And so, firearms are small, compact, they're easy to be transferred and sold, and so they're highly desirable in the criminal community. And so the bill also allows people to take their handguns with them so that they won't be looted while they're mandatorily evacuated from their homes.
The WHO Radio Severe Weather Center has been activated.
I'm Trent Rice. In the WHO Radio newsroom, the National Weather Service in Des Moines issued a tornado warning for east central Pocahontas and northwest Humboldt County, northwestern and north central Iowa until 6:45. Confirmed tornado was located 10 miles northwest of Humboldt, about 11 miles northwest of Dakota City. Storm moving to the northeast at 15 miles an hour. Again, the National Weather Service in Des Moines issues a tornado warning for east central Pocahontas and northwest Humboldt County, north central Iowa until 6:45. Stay tuned to the latest weather information on Newsradio 1040 WHO.
And so it's a good common sense bill. I don't know why it had opposition. Owners and operators of facilities that serve as evacuation or shelters are still able to regulate and prohibit the possession of firearms by anybody who comes to their shelter. So you're not forcing shelters to take people who have guns. The shelters can make rules about them. They're perfectly able to do that under this legislation. And also, every other rule that applies to the use and possession of a firearm still apply. So that means that anybody who is evacuated with their gun, they're still subject to the disorderly conduct laws, the deadly conduct laws, the aggravated assault laws. So they can't engage in any other conduct other than carrying their handguns with them. And it only applies to people in the evacuation area. So That means that if a hurricane hits Corpus Christi and they declare a state of emergency and an evacuation in Corpus Christi, that doesn't mean that it automatically gives people in El Paso and Lubbock the ability to carry their handguns with them if they don't have an LTC.
Well, and Edwin, I think you and I have the same view of why a person carries a handgun for personal protection, but it does sound to me, you expressed that there was some opposition to this, that you get into the classic argument of, oh, I don't want someone carrying this into an emergency shelter. Same reason that we in Iowa established gun-free zones. Can't have them in a shopping mall, can't have them here. You know, people are very reluctant to allow in certain areas folks to carry a handgun. So is that still the eternal debate that, yeah, we understand, you know, law-abiding gun owners want to use guns for protection, but not in my spot, not in my place?
Yeah, that was their initial concern, and then the authors of the bill revised it to say, okay, you know, if operators of shelters want to keep handguns out, they still retain the ability to do that. You know, this basically is just protecting people, and it's for, you know, it's for a week. It's for 7 days that they're allowed to do this. So once the evacuation order has expired, you know, 7 days after that, then, you know, we go back to the state of the usual law, which is that people who don't have LTCs cannot possess handguns, lawfully possess handguns outside of their, you know, their real property, their motor vehicles, or their watercraft.
Edwin, often when a state like Texas passes a law like this, another pro-Second Amendment state, and I consider Iowa to be a pro-Second Amendment state, they'll follow suit. This makes sense to me that looting would be a concern in the wake of a natural disaster, and it made sense to me, the point you made about criminals wanting to get their hands on these handguns. So would you think this is something that other states will take a look at? Would the NRA get involved and say, yeah, other states, take a look at Texas's law?
Yeah, I think that they should. Now, I know that Iowa has floods.
Yeah.
The Mississippi River will flood there. I don't know what kind of wildlife Iowa has, but here in Texas, we got a lot of dangerous wildlife roaming the countryside. Texas is home of all 4 species of poisonous snakes. We have crocodiles, we have feral hogs, you know, there's any number of dangerous animals out there. And of course, whenever disaster hits, it drives the dangerous animals from their home, just like it drives humans from their homes. And so, you know, whenever you're out having to, you know, be panicked and being evacuated, your chances of encountering a dangerous wild animal that you might have to use a firearm to defend yourself against has increased exponentially.
Gun law expert Edwin Walker, based in Texas. Edwin, it is always a pleasure to get your perspective on these issues. Thanks very much for joining me.